Okay, so the project that we're going to have coming up for this weekend, here's a working model of it, and I'm going to look at this, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about last week's as well. So I'm giving you an idea of what your data structure is going to look like. It's fairly simplistic. What you basically have here is you're going to have a collection of categories. A category has an ID and a name, and a category also has a collection of products. And each product has an ID and a name as well. So you're going to have to build a module, a file, that's going to allow you to do a couple of different things here. I didn't do all of the CRUD methods because I feel that that could be a little bit complicated. But you could sort of get an idea of, well, actually, I have it in here, the methods that you're going to want to have. You're going to want to have a method to get all of the categories, which would basically just be returning this data. Every category comes along, its products come along for the ride. This is a nested data structure. You're going to want to be able to get a category, so if an ID is passed, you're going to want to be able to get a category. You're going to want to insert a category, which is going to be nothing more than finding the maximum category ID, incrementing it by 1, adding it to this structure. You're going to want to delete a category, which is going to be nothing more than finding the category you want to delete and removing it from this structure. And you're also going to want to insert a product and delete a product. And that's a little bit trickier, where you're going to have to, when you end up inserting a product, you're going to have the information on the product you want to insert, and you'll also have the category ID, and you're going to have to find that category and insert it into the right category, and insert it into the products array that corresponds to the correct category, and the same thing for deleting a product. And what you're missing here are the edits. And again, I wanted to sort of pull this out, make it a little bit simpler, few less routes that you had to end up dealing with. Now, again, this is sort of going to be the data model of your application, and you should name things accordingly. Create a file called db.js. These are the things that are going to end up getting exported from this method. It's going to be, and it's kind of generous, roughly about 60 lines of code, not a ton. The routes are really important, because when you look at the routes, this is really how a user is interacting with this application. So we're going to have a get route for getting all the categories. We're going to have a post route that's going to allow us to insert a category. We're going to have a delete route that allows us to delete a category. And we'll also have a route that'll give us an individual category so we could look at the products for that category. We're also going to have a post route. Now, what these are nested routes. Okay? So again, if you understand the concept, and I saw in the first weekend assignment, some people weren't getting this. We want our routes to be RESTful, meaning that when we insert a category, we're posting to /categories. When we delete a category, we're deleting to /categories ID. Okay? When we're getting a category, we're looking at categories and the ID. So since products are nested inside of categories, when we want to create a product, we're going to go to categories, the category ID, /products. Okay? Again, products are nested under categories. We go through categories to get products. So our RESTful route, again, if we were just inserting a category, we're posting to categories. Now we're creating a product under category. So here's our category. /products is what we're creating. We're creating a product. When we delete a product, /categories, the ID of the category, /products, the ID of the product.
Could you define just RESTful route?
RESTful route is a route where the route itself describes what you're doing. Okay? If I say to you, hey, look, here's a route, it's a delete route, and you just looked at this route, you could make an assumption that the entity that it's dealing with is going to be a category. Okay? So the combination of the route and the verb will tell you exactly what you're doing, right? So in other words, I should be able to go, if I was to go into your application and open it up and just go to your website, I could guess how to get to the detail for a category by going to /categories ID. Okay, I should be able to guess that I'm going to be looking at all the categories if I go to /categories. It's not this guessing game. I saw, some people when they were doing their routes, they were editing a product and they would edit with a post, and it would be something like post / products, the ID of the product, and maybe / edit or something like that. You don't need to do that. The route should be descriptive. It should be a patch to / products, the ID of the product, and your payload would be what you're going to end up editing. Should be very simplistic. And I'll show you sort of an example of this when we look at the sort of review for last week. You're going to have just a couple of pages here. So again, looking at it, this is the working version of the app. You notice here we're showing you the number of categories that you have. Okay? So here you can, these are all the categories in your app. I could go into a category and see that I have a tennis racket. I could add a basketball. Okay? But again, if you end up looking at my route, it's a RESTful route. It's /categories1 as opposed to /categories2. Okay? Again, there's really only three views within this application. There's your home view, there's your categories view, and I could add a category. If I decided to add a category called Fizz, I can do that. Now I've got a category Fizz. Notice when I added it, this increments by 1. It takes me to this category. Okay? Theoretically, you might say that this RESTful route might be /categories3 /products. It's a judgment call. Doesn't really matter one way or the other. This is actually a category, and on the particular category page, I could add a product for this category. I could also delete a product for this category. If I go back to all the categories, I have the ability to delete any of these, and I could see my data structure on the right. Okay? Again, this is sort of helpful, so you can sort of see if things are not working, why they're not working. Okay? So this sort of describes what the structure is going to be for your application. Ilya.
Silly question because it's related more to HTML and CSS than JavaScript.
Oh, by the way, just as an aside, I do very little review of your HTML and CSS. Everyone's got their different ways of doing it. I'm no expert on it, but I'm just letting you know that when I go through the review, I sort of have to pick what I'm going to look at, and I'm assuming that things are displaying the way you want them to display, and I'm really focused on more of either of the JavaScript code. It just makes a little bit more sense for me. But go ahead.
How did you do the two divisions side by side? How did you do?
Oh, that's a good question. You don't have to. I'm using Bootstrap, and if you look at the Bootstrap documentation, it's fairly. And by the way, if you want to know any of this stuff, you could always just go and click on this, and I sent out this link, and you could view the page source. So the best way for me to show you this is that I have over here, I've got a row, and I've got column small 6, and I've got another column small 6 over here on the right for my data. So if you look at Bootstrap, Bootstrap allows you to do rows and columns pretty easily. It's actually, we're going to learn something when we end up getting into Bootstrap. We're going to actually build this ourselves. But what's kind of nice is that this is actually responsive, where if I move this over, this will sort of shift down to the bottom. This is something we're going to look at. We haven't looked at it yet, so it's nothing to really think about too much. But if you want to do columns, just look under Bootstrap and see the syntax for rows and columns.
It's called grid on the Bootstrap.
Right.
Can you go up? When you click on like home or categories, you're changing the class there
To active.
to active.
Yeah.
What's the best way to do that while keeping that templated?
I'll show you how I did it. I mean, there's any number of ways to do it, but let's actually look at, so this is the assignment for this week, okay? Again, sort of keep within the parameters that I've specified here. Again, name this, same thing it's named, I think I put here, Acme, products, categories, JS. Okay, JS meaning that we're storing our data locally. Eventually, we'll do this and we'll store our data in a database. But what I want to point out here is that this is and I put this up as well, this is a non-ES6 version of your last assignment. But I just want to point out a couple of different things, and I'll answer your question as well. When you look at this code for the server, a couple of things. I saw that people were configuring their body parser and their method override within individual route files. Don't. If you're going to use body parser and method override, you're going to use it for your entire application. The place to configure it is right here in your main file. I also saw that people would do things like app.use / and require / routes. Don't. It's a simple enough application. Let someone who's looking at it know exactly what you're doing. The only routes that you're going to have, in our case, coming up for this project is going to be app.use / categories, require / category routes. Okay? Again, put your main route here and set up your other routers over here. Keep it simple. Okay? Not a lot of code in this file. This actually, if I had to do it again, I would modify this. I would much rather you ended up using a / vendor here, and I probably put that comment under your code as well. Again, this was sort of done a while ago, and if I would redo this, I would redo it with ES6. The next one is going to be, you'll see all the ES6 syntax. A couple of other points here. If you look at some of these routes, first of all, looking at the product model, okay? Naming is important. I'm internally storing this, so I put a variable _products here. Again, a couple of very simple methods. Get all the products, get a product, update a product, add a product. You see when you update a product, you pass in the ID and the data. I saw some of you, because again, we were only updating one thing, you would just pass in the new name. It's short-sighted. Pass in the new product that you're going to be updating. And frankly, naming-wise, if I saw this on yours, I would probably say, don't call it data. Call it updated product or something along these lines. The naming is important. There is, again, this is probably about, and when I saw yours, some of your solutions, pull this out. This getting the max ID. Pull this out, and this way you can just say product ID and call some function called next ID. This shouldn't necessarily be in here, and in my next version, you'll see that as well.
So is it better you have like your exports model as one massive object?
Mm-hmm.
Does it matter if we just define like a list of functions and then make those?
I think in some ways you're better off defining a list of functions. I think it reads a little bit easier. Yeah, I did this. I think if I was to do this over again, I think I would have a function called getProduct up here.
That's how you did it for us.
Yeah, I think I would rather do it that way instead of again having this massive thing. And this is fine. If someone handed this in, I'd be okay with it. Go ahead.
It's in this. It's about this project, but when I deleted, when I changed the record, because there was only 2 fields, I deleted it and I added it again.
Not good. Yeah, find the one.
That was a bad idea, but I didn't know should I have gone through the.
No, I mean just if you're editing something, get the thing that you're editing, and modify it. Yeah. Look, there's any number of ways to do it. What I'm going to look for when I look at this, I'm going to look and see if there's too much code here. If I look at it, there's too much code. There's something that you're overthinking something. Something is overly complicated. If the routes don't look like RESTful routes, so here in my products routes, I've got a get from my product. So in answer to your question about how to know what to end up displaying here, I think probably if I went back to look at my code here, and again, you could use this code if you want to. If I look at my views and I look at my layout, here I'm passing a value for nav. If it's home, I make this active. If not, I make this active. And I think just to keep it a little bit simpler, I think what I did here was in my products routes, So here I'm just passing this in. So when I have my add form, I actually do my nav for products. When I do my get, I have my nav for products. And this way I'm able to highlight that, that tab. Any number of ways to do it, but this is perfectly reasonable to do it this way.
I think on all your things, when you use the roots, like when you actually put the roots, plug it into the express, you're just directly calling the require. Is that better than saving it to like a variable and then using it?
It makes absolutely no difference at all. There's no reason to put another variable in. This is your model. Another thing, naming. Capitalize this. This is your model. This is your big daddy. He's doing all the work. Make it a capital, because when we end up coming into models where we're using databases, it's going to make things a lot easier. Again, think about the idea, the big daddy, the big product, right? And then we have the little product when we actually create a product, which would be a little pig. Okay? Again, there's not a ton of stuff going on here. It's very clear when you look at this that this product model is updating the product. It takes the ID and it takes the request body, and it ends up doing a redirect, right? The delete, again, all two-liners. No need to create interim variables. You're probably not going to end up needing them. And again, very, very light, very restful, right? This is going to give me my add form. When I post, I end up creating a product. I pass the ID when I delete a product. I end up doing a put. I could have done a patch too, I guess, either or. This gives me my edit form. And again, this one's going to be a little bit easier because you have less views to do. This was a little bit more complicated because you had a few more views to do. Again, what I try to do here is that I'm going to add a level of complexity by having something that's nested, but I'm going to take something away. So again, you don't have to worry about all these different views that can end up convoluted. Look, my feeling is that if you could do an insert and a delete, and you're doing delete with method override, if you could do a delete, I think you could do an update too, right? So, and by the way, you're getting to the same spot. You're getting to the exact same spot. The bottom line is, can you add categories and products? Instead of updating a product, delete it and re-add it, right? I mean, you know, say to the user, hey, look, you know what? Next feature, I'm going to allow you to update it. Now, hey, look, I want to change my product name. Okay, you could do it. Here's what you do. You delete the product and you re-add it, okay? Well, I really want to just be able to go update it. Well, that's a feature coming up. Can you get to where you want to go to? Okay? And you'll end up getting it. So, again, those were a lot of the things that I ended up looking at. Again, I didn't look at the views too much, but, you know, in terms of if I did look at them, I would be looking for, you know, again, you want to have things formatted nicely, you don't want to have things too complicated. You don't have to turn into a Bootstrap expert. Again, I'm not really focusing that much on that. For me, I like it to look decent when I'm testing it, so it just makes me feel a little bit better about myself. But again, RESTful routes, naming conventions, don't complicate things, don't make them overly complicated. If it seems too complicated, you're doing something wrong. Okay?
So how did you do the tab?
I showed you. So this is basically a variable here that I'm passing to the view. Again, there's some logic that's on the view. So here in my my main page, I'm setting the nav to home, and I basically have that variable that I'm looking at. So I think that this gives a little bit of insight into sort of what I'm looking for here. Again, follow the convention, name the files the way they're named here. You can do it in whatever order you want. Okay. It's just going to make it a lot easier for me to go and review it. Again, I think a big part of this is just not going in and sort of overthinking it. You do it in whatever order you want to do it. If you want to start by doing db.js, well, go for it. If you want to start by setting up the Express app, setting up the different pages, then do that as well. It's really, really up to you how you end up getting to that end result. What I would just say, and I think it's pretty important, is that, at this stage of the game, you shouldn't be writing, 10 lines of code before you reload things in a browser. It should be a lot less than that. It should be 2 lines of code, 3 lines of code. Again, as you go a little bit farther along, you could start adding, more lines of code. But again, you want to build this thing out slowly. It's not a ton of code that you're writing. I don't know, maybe 60 lines does feel like a lot, but it's not that much code that you're writing. I could give you some boilerplate to start out with, but I don't want to. I want you to be very, very comfortable setting up an Express templated application that has a data layer that's just storing the data in memory. Okay, let me stop this recording.